I'm suspending you until you accept the open marriage with my lover. My wife, the CEO, tried to replace me. The next morning, she smiled smugly until the company lawyer walked in, pale, and her smile vanished instantly. I'm going to tell you about the day my wife, Sarah, smiled at me like I was nothing, and how that one smug expression cost her absolutely everything she'd spent 15 years building. But to understand that, we have to start 3 weeks earlier, right there in her corner office on the 47th floor, where the Seattle skyline looked less like a city and more like a kingdom she'd personally conquered. And in many ways, she had. Sarah Chun, Forbes 40 Under 40 CEO. The woman whose face had graced the cover of Business Insider with the headline, "The Architect of Modern Supply Chain Innovation." She was my wife. 12 years, she'd been my wife. And for 8 of those years, I'd been her strategic operations director, the guy who took her brilliant, messy visions and somehow hammered them into an executable reality. We met in grad school. She was getting her MBA at Wharton. I was finishing my master's in operations management. She talked about business like it was poetry, describing supply chains as symphony orchestras where she was the conductor. Honestly, I fell in love with her mind first, then her relentless drive, and then, yeah, the way she could laugh at 2 in the morning over cold pizza and spreadsheets. We built Shin logic together. Well, that's not quite right. She was the builder. I was the one who engineered the systems that actually made Shin logic work. There's a huge difference, and I totally understood it from day one. Sarah was the lightning. I was the lightning rod that channeled it into something that wouldn't instantly burn the whole house down. And it worked. God, it worked so well. By the 5th year, we had 200 employees. By the 8th, we'd gone public. By the 10th, we were worth millions. And Sarah was up on a TED Talk stage, talking about the future of sustainable logistics. I was so proud of her. I was proud of us. I was proud of what we built. Past tense. Remember that. The office she called me to that Thursday afternoon was all glass, steel, and ruthless, minimalist elegance. White and chrome and meticulously curated. The only splash of color was this abstract painting on the wall, red and black slashes on a white canvas. It cost more than most people's homes, and it was pure anger, emptiness, and separation. I really should have paid closer attention to that painting. "Close the door," she said the moment I walked in. "No, hello, honey. No, thanks for coming up. Just close the door," using that cold, razor-sharp voice she usually reserved for suppliers who'd missed a deadline. I closed it. I stood there, right in front of her massive desk, feeling like an employee summoned for a performance review. Which, I guess, is exactly what I was. She didn't look up from her laptop for a solid 30 seconds. It's a power move she'd used 100 times. Make them wait. Make them understand who holds the power in the room. I'd seen her do it with senators and investors. I'd just never, ever been on the receiving end. "We need to talk about our marriage," she finally said, still not looking at me. The Seattle skyline behind her was the typical November gray. Rain streaked the windows. The clouds were so low you could barely see the top of the Space Needle. It felt like an unfinished thought. "Okay," I managed. "I'm not happy," she continued. And now she looked up, her dark eyes meeting mine with something that was disturbingly close to pity. "I haven't been happy for a while, Derek. Here's the thing about being married to someone for 12 years. You know their rhythms. You know when they're building up to something big. You know when they've rehearsed a conversation a dozen times in their head, probably during a shower or a morning run. And this was definitely rehearsed." "I'm listening," I said, because honestly, what the hell else do you say? "I think we've just grown apart," she said. "You're so focused on the operational side, on the details, the process. And I'm focused on the big picture, the strategy, the vision. We're not partners anymore, Derek. We're just coworkers." The rain outside was absolutely hammering the glass now. That soft percussion was the soundtrack to every gloomy Seattle winter. "We're more than coworkers," I said quietly, trying to hold my ground. "Are we?" She leaned way back in her chair, and that's when I saw it. That tiny, slight smile playing on the corner of her mouth. The one she got right before she clinched a major negotiation. When was the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about resource allocation or quarterly projections? She was right. Painfully, accurately right. "So what are you saying?" I asked. But a cold, sinking feeling in my gut already knew the answer. I think a part of me had known for months, maybe longer, but I'd been frantically pushing that truth away. "I'm saying I want to open our marriage." The words just hung there in the air between us, as clear and cold as the glass separating us from a 47-story drop. "Open it," I repeated idiotically. Maybe I'd misheard. Except, I hadn't. "I met someone," she said, and that smile was back, a little wider now. It was a winner's smile. "His name is Marcus Ree. He's a partner at Goldman. We met at the Singapore conference last month." Singapore. She'd been gone for an entire week. A week where I'd managed the entire Pacific Rim Client Summit and pulled off a massive deal that saved us $12 million in shipping costs. And she had sent me precisely 3 text messages the whole time. "Are you having an affair, Sarah?" I asked. "It's not an affair if I'm being honest about it," she corrected me, instantly. "That's why I'm talking to you. I don't want to lie. I don't want to sneak around. I want us to evolve into a more modern arrangement." "A modern arrangement?" Like we were upgrading our phone plan. "And what exactly do I get in this modern arrangement?" I asked. Freedom, she said, shrugging slightly. The same freedom I have. You can see other people too, if you want. No judgment, no jealousy. We're both adults, Derek. I stood there, right in her gorgeous corner office. The very space we'd celebrated in when we first leased it, where we'd done things on her CEO desk that were absolutely inappropriate for an office, and a profound realization hit me. She fully expected me to say no. She was counting on me to explode, to refuse. This whole painful conversation was theater. She wanted the moral high ground. She wanted to be able to say she had tried to be honest, that she had offered me the same freedom she was taking, and that I was the rigid one, the traditionalist, the one unwilling to compromise. Then, she could leave with a clean conscience. She could tell the board, the investors, and her friends over expensive dinners that the marriage had just sadly run its course. I'd sat across from her during enough negotiations to recognize the staging. I need to think about it, I finally said. That's fair, she replied, and I saw a flicker of genuine surprise in her eyes. She had been braced for a shout, a scene, for me to act like a petulant child. Take all the time you need. I turned to leave. Derek, she called out. I stopped at the door. I love you. You know that, right? This isn't about love. It's about being realistic about what we've become. I just nodded without turning around. If I had turned around, she would have seen the look on my face, and I wasn't ready for her to see that yet. The elevator ride down to my office on the 38th floor took 45 seconds. I meticulously counted every one, watching the numbers drop, 47, 46, 45. Each number was a step away from her altitude, away from her personal stratosphere. My office was smaller. No corner view, no million-dollar abstract art, just a purely functional space with 2 monitors, a decent chair, and a whiteboard covered in optimization algorithms. I never cared about the view. I cared about the work. I sat down at my desk and opened a folder I had created 3 months ago. I had desperately hoped I would never need to open it. But deep down, I had known. A tiny, quiet part of me had known since Singapore. Since before Singapore. Even since the night she came home late from a board meeting, and her phone lit up while she was in the shower. I'd seen the name Marcus paired with a single heart emoji. I hadn't snooped. I hadn't checked her messages. I just saw the notification and filed that information away in the same mental drawer where I'd been collecting a lot of uncomfortable truths lately. But after that night, I had started documenting. The folder on my screen was titled Insurance. It contained 9 months of carefully compiled data. Not personal emails. I never violated her privacy like that. But corporate communications, board meeting minutes, financial reports, everything that crossed my desk as strategic operations director, including some things that probably shouldn't have. Shin logic had grown too fast, maybe. And when you grow that fast, you cut corners. You creatively interpret regulations. Sarah called it aggressive optimization. Our lawyers called it pushing the boundaries within legal frameworks. I called it what it really was: securities fraud, environmental regulation violations, and a series of labor law breaches that would absolutely make the Department of Labor very, very interested. None of it was massive, Enron-level criminality, but it was enough. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts, and I had the documentation for every single cut. I had spent 3 months compiling it, organizing it, creating a clear narrative that any regulatory agency, or, God help us, any journalist could easily follow. I'd done it quietly, late at night, always making sure to only access information I had legitimate authorization for. I wasn't stealing anything. I was simply organizing what I already knew. I did it as insurance, hoping I'd never use it. Like buying a fire extinguisher and praying your house never burns down. Well, my house was currently in flames. I opened my email and started typing. To Board of Directors, Shin Logic Corporation. CC, General Counsel. Subject, Notification of Resignation. I paused there, my fingers hovering over the keys. Once I sent this, there would be no going back. Everything would change. But everything had already changed. I was just the last one to finally admit it. Dear members of the board, effective immediately, I resign from my position as Strategic Operations Director at Shin Logic Corporation. This decision is made after considerable reflection on both my professional role and my personal circumstances. Keep it professional. Don't give them anything personal. I have prepared comprehensive transition documentation for my replacement. All current projects are documented with clear next steps, timeline requirements, and potential risks. This documentation has been uploaded to the shared drive under Operations Transition 2024. I want to be clear that this resignation is voluntary and immediate. I will not be serving a notice period. I will not be available for consultations or transition meetings. All questions should be directed to my documentation. Then came the real part. I have also prepared a comprehensive review of certain operational practices and regulatory compliance concerns that I feel obligated to bring to your attention. This review is attached to this email and includes supporting documentation. That was the key phrase. The one that would make the lawyer's blood pressure spike. The one that would make Sarah understand exactly what I had done. It is my sincere hope that these concerns can be addressed internally. However, if any regulatory agency or journalist contacts me in the future, I will have no choice but to provide them with the same comprehensive documentation, in the interest of legal compliance and truthfulness. There it was, the polite, professional threat. Not blackmail, never that. Just a very clear statement of intent. If they left me alone, I would leave them alone. If they came after me, I had the insurance. It has been an honor to contribute to the growth of Shin Logic. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Sincerely, Derek Shin, Strategic Operations Director. I attached the documentation. 67 pages of meticulously organized evidence. Every email, every meeting minute, every financial report that showed the pattern. I had structured it exactly like one of our operational reviews. Clear executive summary, detailed findings, supporting appendices. If you knew how to read it, you'd see the whole, terrifying story. The board would know how to read it. My finger hovered over the send button. Sarah thought she knew me. She thought she knew what I would do. She thought I was the careful, measured man who would never make waves, who would just quietly accept her proposed arrangement because I was too conflict-averse, too passive, too practical to risk burning it all down. She mistook my patience for weakness. She mistook my careful planning for an inability to act. She thought because I built systems, I couldn't dismantle them. I clicked send. The email vanished from my outbox. Somewhere on the 47th floor, in the inboxes of 7 board members and our very expensive general counsel, an email was arriving that would detonate like a meticulously placed explosive. Then, I started packing my desk. It didn't take long. I never kept much personal stuff. A picture of Sarah and me at our wedding? Into the trash. A novelty coffee mug that said, "World's okayest COO?" Into the trash. The little Zen garden someone gave me as a joke? Into the trash. What I kept, my personal laptop, my notebook full of non-work ideas, and a small USB drive containing copies of everything I had just sent to the board, encrypted with military-grade security. The rain was still falling heavily outside. I stood at my window, looking out at the gray city, and felt a rush of something I hadn't felt in years, relief. Freedom. The real kind, not the hollow kind Sarah had offered me as a consolation prize. My phone vibrated. Text message from Sarah. "Can you come back up? We should finish our conversation." I stared at the message for a long moment, then just powered my phone all the way off. The next morning, she would come to work expecting me to either agree to her proposal or start a fight about it. She would have her arguments ready. She would find an empty desk. She would find a resignation letter. And then, this was the moment I was truly waiting for. She would realize I had sent comprehensive documentation of every legally questionable decision she'd made to the entire board and the general counsel. She would finally understand that I had been paying attention all along, that I had seen it all, and that the quiet, competent COO she had taken completely for granted had just executed the most perfect strategic play of his career. I walked out of my office, leaving the door slightly ajar behind me. I took the elevator to the parking garage, got in my car, and drove home to the beautiful house we bought together, the one with the view of the Sound, the one with the exposed beams and the chef's kitchen. That night, I packed 2 suitcases, clothes, toiletries, my laptop, and that USB drive. Everything else could be sorted out later by the lawyers. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter, next to a note that said, simply, "You wanted an open marriage. Consider this the widest possible opening." Then I drove to a luxury hotel downtown, one with a stunning view of the water. I ordered room service, turned on my phone long enough to see 17 missed calls from Sarah and 3 from the general counsel, and then turned it right back off. I slept better that night than I had in months. Tomorrow, the real show would begin. Tomorrow, Sarah would learn the cold difference between the lightning and the lightning rod. I woke up at 6:47 a.m. in the quiet of the hotel room. I'd paid $400 for the night, which felt absurdly expensive, yet somehow appropriate. The Seattle skyline was crystal clear through the floor-to-ceiling windows, washed clean by the rain. I kept my phone off. Instead, I ordered black coffee from room service and sat by the window, watching the city slowly wake up. Somewhere in our house in Queen and Sarah was probably getting ready for her routine, her 5-mile run, her protein shake, checking her emails while her hair dried. I wondered what time she realized I hadn't come home. I wondered if she had even noticed. The coffee arrived at 7:15, strong and black, just the way I liked it. The young attendant, maybe 25, had that polite Seattle earnestness. "Beautiful morning," he said. "It is," I agreed. He left, and I sat there, thinking about the fact that in one email, I had just destroyed my career, my marriage, and possibly the company my wife built. It should have felt worse. It should have felt catastrophic. Instead, it felt like putting down a crushing weight I'd been carrying for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. Sarah would arrive at the office around 8:30. She liked to be early, beating most of the staff, but late enough to have completed her strategic thinking for the day. She liked riding the elevator up to 47 in solitude. I pictured her there now, probably irritated I hadn't replied, probably composing the lecture she'd give me about being passive-aggressive. She would expect me to be at my desk. Maybe she'd think I was sulking. She wouldn't think I was gone. At 8:47, I couldn't wait any longer. I turned my phone on. It instantly began to vibrate, the notifications flooding in like digital gunfire. Calls, voicemails, messages. It was digital chaos. 73 missed calls, 46 text messages, 12 voicemails since midnight. I checked the texts first. Most were from Sarah. "Where are you, Derek? This isn't funny. We need to talk about this rationally. You can't just disappear. I know you're upset, but this is childish. Call me." Then the tone shifted around 2 a.m. Derek, I'm worried. Please, just let me know you're okay. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have sprung this on you like that. Can we please talk? Then, the explosion. The board got your email. What the hell did you send them? It was 2:37 a.m. The moment she realized. The messages after that were different. Pure panic. You need to retract that email immediately. Derek, you don't understand what you've done. Call me now. This is going to destroy everything we built. Notice the pronoun, we built, when she was terrified and needed me. I listened to one voicemail, the one from 3:15 a.m. Derek, her voice cracked, raw and unfiltered. What did you send the board? Richard just called me. He said you documented everything, every decision, every risk we took. Derek, you're going to destroy the company. You're going to destroy everything we worked for. Please call me back. Always we, when things were collapsing. Always I, when things were successful. I deleted the rest of the voicemails unplayed. There were also messages from Richard Joy, our board chairman. Derek, we need to talk. Call me as soon as you get this. This is serious. We need to discuss your allegations before this goes any further. I'm asking you as someone who has known you for 8 years. Give us a chance to respond to your concerns internally. Translation, please don't call the SEC. Please don't go to the press. Please let us sweep this under the rug. I opened my laptop instead and checked the news. Nothing yet. It was too early, but the story would break. Because the wonderful thing about sending documentation to a board of directors is that boards talk. They have to. 7 people can't keep a secret when that secret threatens a multi-million-dollar valuation. Someone would leak, to a lawyer, a spouse, a journalist. It was inevitable. I had lit the fuse. Now, all I had to do was wait for the explosion. At 9:03, my phone rang. Not Sarah, not Richard. A number I didn't recognize, but with a Seattle area code. I answered. Mr. Chun, a woman's voice, professional and completely neutral. This is Jennifer Kohler from the Pacific Northwest Regional Office of the Department of Labor. I'm calling about certain documentation that was forwarded to our office this morning regarding Shin Corporation. My spine straightened. That was fast. We take workplace safety and labor law violations very seriously, Mr. Chun. I'd like to schedule a time for you to come in and discuss these allegations in detail. Someone on the board had already forwarded my email to the DOL in less than 12 hours, which meant someone was either incredibly ethical, incredibly scared, or both. I'm available at your convenience, I said. How about tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I'll be there. She gave me the address, thanked me for my cooperation, and hung up. I sat there, looking at my cooling coffee, the phone still in my hand, and realized I had just crossed the Rubicon. The Department of Labor was officially involved. This was no longer an internal dispute. This would not be handled quietly. Sarah's carefully constructed empire was about to face its first real audit. My phone rang again. Sarah. I let it go to voicemail. Richard. Voicemail. Then, a brand new number. I answered out of curiosity. Derek Chun. A man's voice, younger, full of energy. Yes. My name is Tyler Brox. I'm a reporter with the Seattle Times. I understand you recently resigned from Shin Corporation and made some very serious allegations about corporate practices. Would you be willing to comment? The press. It had leaked to the press, even faster than I thought. Someone had made a calculated leak. No comment, I said firmly. Mr. Chun, if there are legitimate concerns about how Shin operates, the public has a right to know. You are in a unique position too. No comment, I repeated. If you want information, file a FOIA request with the Department of Labor in a few weeks. I hung up. The phone immediately rang again. Different number. I turned it off completely, but not before seeing one last text message from Sarah. I'm coming to find you. Tell me where you are. No threats, no anger, just raw desperation. I packed my laptop, checked out using the in-room tablet, and went down to the lobby. The morning rush was on. Business travelers checking out, going to meetings, living their orderly lives. I felt like I was watching them from behind glass. I got in my car and drove north, without any real destination in mind. Just away. Away from downtown. Away from the office building where Sarah was probably standing in front of my empty desk, surrounded by furious lawyers, trying to figure out how to contain this. I ended up at Discovery Park, right at the overlook where you can see across the Sound to the Olympic Mountains. The peaks were sharp and white, every detail visible in the clean, washed air. This is where Sarah and I came after we signed our Series B funding. 8 years ago, we stood right here, and she kissed me and said, "We are going to change the world." And God, I believed her then. I believed her completely. I sat on a bench and turned my phone back on, just long enough to check one thing. The stock price of Shin. It had opened at 9:30 and was already down 7%. Someone was selling. The whispers had officially started. By noon, it would be a stampede. My phone rang. Sarah. I let it go to voicemail. Then, Richard. Voicemail. Then, David Park, my closest friend at the company. We started the same week when Shin was 15 people in a rented space above a bar. I answered. "You magnificent bastard," he said, without preamble. I couldn't help it. I laughed. "That's not what I expected you to say." "What were you expecting? That I'd be mad?" "Derek, I've been watching this company cut corners for 2 years. I've been watching you get quieter and quieter in meetings. I knew something was brewing. I just didn't know you had the sheer balls to do this." I'm not sure balls is the right word, I said. More like desperation. Sarah is absolutely losing her mind, he continued. She called an emergency executive meeting at 8 o'clock this morning. Showed up looking like she hadn't slept, which is unheard of for her. The lawyers have been in the conference room ever since. What are they saying officially? Nothing. Unofficially, they're scrambling to figure out if they can make this go away. But Derek, the DOL called. The SEC called. Apparently, a Bloomberg reporter has been camped out in the lobby since 9:30. Bloomberg? That was faster than I expected. How bad is it? I asked. For the company? Bad. We're looking at audits, investigations, probably massive fines. Some of the major contracts Sarah signed might be voidable if we misrepresented our compliance status. He paused. For Sarah personally? Potentially worse. The board is already whispering about whether she needs to step down temporarily while this gets sorted out. Step down. Sarah Chun, stepping down from the company she built, the company that was her identity, her purpose, her whole proof of self-worth. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. And you? David asked. Where are you? Airport, I said. Leaving town for a while. Smart. Let the lawyers and the regulators fight it out while you're somewhere with a beach and expensive drinks. Something like that. For the record, he said, his voice turning serious. You did the right thing, Derek. I know it doesn't feel like it. I know you just nuked your marriage and probably your career, but those labor violations, the environmental stuff, we were going to get caught eventually. You just controlled the narrative before someone else did. That's what I keep telling myself. Did it help? Not really. He chuckled slightly. Yeah, probably won't for a while. But Derek, when this is all over, when the dust finally settles, you're going to be the guy who stood up for integrity. That's worth something, man. We said our goodbyes, and I sat there, looking out at the mountains, and opened my personal email. 3 new messages. The first was from a headhunter. I represent several firms interested in speaking with you about executive operations roles. Your experience at Shin Logic would be highly valued. Please let me know if you're open to exploratory conversations. The vultures could smell blood, and were already circling, trying to figure out if I was an asset or a liability. The second was from Richard Joy, sent to my personal email. Derek, I need you to understand something. The board is grateful, genuinely grateful, that you brought these concerns to our attention internally first. You gave us the chance to respond. But you have put us in an impossible position. If we don't act, we're complicit. If we do act, we admit to violations that could cost us hundreds of millions. Sarah is talking about fighting this, about hiring a PR firm, about discrediting your documentation as the act of a disgruntled employee going through a divorce. I am telling you this because I have known you for 8 years and I believe you are a good person who found himself in a bad situation. I am asking you to think very carefully about your next steps. This can still be resolved with minimal damage to everyone involved. Please call me. I read it. It was a good email, sympathetic, reasonable, trying to make me feel guilty and responsible for the damage. It was pure negotiation. I deleted it. The third email was from an address I didn't recognize. Marcus Williams. Mr. Chun, you don't know me, but I worked at Shin Logic for 3 years as a warehouse supervisor before I was fired last year. I was fired after raising concerns about safety violations and worker misclassification. I saw the news this morning. I want you to know there are at least 20 of us, former employees, who were pushed out for asking questions or refusing to follow policies we knew were wrong. If you need witnesses, if you need additional documentation, if you need people willing to speak on the record, we are here. Thank you for doing what we couldn't. I stared at that email for a long time. 20 people. 20 people who tried to do the right thing and lost their jobs for it. 20 people who were silenced while I stayed silent. 2. Comfortable in my director's salary and my marriage to the CEO. I told myself I was documenting for insurance, for protection. But really, I had just been waiting for the pain to become personal enough that I couldn't ignore it anymore. Sarah offering me an open marriage wasn't the cause. It was just the final, necessary weight that finally tipped the scales. I wrote back to Marcus Williams. Marcus, thank you for reaching out. I am meeting with the Department of Labor tomorrow at 10 a.m. Would you be willing to speak with them as well? If so, please contact Jennifer Kohler at this number. I'm sorry I didn't do this sooner. Derek. Then I closed my laptop and tried to eat my sandwich, but it tasted like cardboard and regret. At 1:30 p.m., my phone rang again. Sarah. I almost didn't answer, but something compelled me to pick up. The all-hands meeting is in 30 minutes, she said. No greeting. Her voice was hoarse, strained. I'm going to tell them you had a mental health crisis, that you were under enormous stress and made allegations that don't hold up under scrutiny. That's a lie, Sarah, I said, completely calm. It's a necessary fiction, she corrected me. The alternative is admitting everything you documented is true, which would be corporate suicide. It is true, Sarah. You know it. You knew all of it, and you did it anyway because you were so focused on growth, on valuation, on being the next unicorn success story, that you stopped caring about the rules. That is not fair, she cried out. There was real hurt in her voice now. We were trying to build something revolutionary. Do you know how hard it is for a female CEO to get funding? To be taken seriously, I had to be aggressive. I had to push the boundaries. There's a difference between pushing boundaries and breaking federal law. Who are you to judge me? The hurt was turning to pure anger. You were there for all of it. You executed half of those decisions. You are just as complicit as I am. I know, I said. That's why I'm cooperating with the Department of Labor. I'm not claiming to be innocent. I'm claiming to be done. A long, heavy silence followed. Marcus has nothing to do with this, she finally whispered. Oh, he does. No, I admit it. This isn't about Marcus. It's about you looking at me yesterday and offering me freedom as if it were a gift. As if you were being generous, when what you were really doing was asking me to agree to be devalued. To agree to be less important than your career, your ambition, your new relationship. That's not. You suspended me, I cut in. The words came out harder than I intended. You didn't actually say it, but that's what you meant. Take the time you need to get on board with this arrangement. Or else, figure out how to be okay with it, or there will be consequences. I never said that. You didn't have to. I heard it. I could hear other voices in the background now. Someone asking her a question. The lawyers, probably, needing to know if I was being reasonable, if this could still be contained. What do you want, Derek? Sarah asked, her voice small. Just tell me what you want, and we can work this out. What did I want? I wanted to rewind 8 years to the day we stood at Discovery Park, feeling utterly unstoppable. I wanted the version of Sarah who laughed at 2 a.m. over cold pizza. I wanted the true partnership we had before the company got too big, before the money got too serious. But you can't rewind. You can only move forward. I want you to fix the company, I said. Reclassify the workers correctly. Comply with the environmental regulations. Restate the financials accurately. Make it right, Sarah. Make it the way we should have done it from the beginning. That will tank our valuation. It will destroy us. Yes, I agreed. It will. The board will never approve it. The investors will revolt. Then I guess you'll have to decide what's more important, your valuation or your freedom. That's not fair, she pleaded again. But there was no force left behind the words. You're right, I said. It isn't. But it's real. I hung up. The mountains across the sound were so clear in the morning light, sharp, white, and permanent. They would be there long after Chin logic was gone. That perspective helped. I turned off my phone, got in my car, and drove straight to the airport. It was time to disappear for a while. Time to let the truth do its work. I bought a one-way ticket to San Diego on my personal card. Not because I loved San Diego, but because it was warm, and Seattle had suddenly started to feel like a cage made of gray sky, cold rain, and memories I no longer wanted. The flight didn't leave until 2 p.m., which gave me 4 hours to sit in the airport lounge and watch my old life implode from a safe distance. I turned my phone back on at 11:30 a.m., sitting in a quiet corner of the Alaska Airlines lounge with a sandwich and a beer I didn't want. The notifications flooded in again, but this time I was ready. The Seattle Times had published its story at 10:47 a.m. Shin Logic's OO faces internal allegations of regulatory violations. It was carefully worded, full of sources say and alleged concerns, but the story was out there. The stock had been halted twice for volatility and was already down 14%. The message boards were on fire with panic. I opened the Chin Logic internal Slack, which I still had access to. The company channels were pure chaos. From General at 9:15 a.m. Does anyone know what's going on? Derek's desk is empty, and there are lawyers everywhere. From leadership at 9:47 a.m. All hands meeting at 2 p.m. Attendance mandatory. Sarah will address recent departures and media reports. I wondered what Sarah would say, how she would spin it. She was a master spinner. My phone rang, David Park. I answered. You need to see this, he said. See what? Turn on Bloomberg, they're running the stock chart. It looks like a cliff. The vultures were circling. I kept my phone on and took a walk around the terminal. I felt like a tourist in my own life. I boarded the flight, found my window seat, and settled in. I didn't open my laptop. I just sat, watching the ground recede as the plane climbed above the clouds and into the cold, clear sunshine. I finally felt a little peace. I landed in San Diego, checked into a quiet hotel with an ocean view, and let myself finally relax for a moment. I went for a walk on the beach, watching the waves come in, steady, relentless, and indifferent to human drama. That perspective helped. I called a lawyer Richard had recommended, a sharp woman named Rachel Kim, and explained the situation. She laughed, a short, sharp professional laugh. Well, Mr. Chun, she said, you certainly didn't do things halfway. I explained my meeting with the Department of Labor. Explained the documentation. Explained Sarah's public counter-narrative. She's claiming I'm having a mental health crisis because of the divorce. We'll deal with that, Rachel said. Your voluntary testimony to federal authorities is a much stronger argument than any personal narrative she can spin. We just need to focus on what you need to do to protect yourself and, more importantly, the company. I opened my laptop again. My phone started vibrating again with calls from all over the country. I ignored them all, but one text message caught my eye. It was from Sarah. I'm pregnant. 6 weeks. It's yours. I stared at the message, reading it over and over. Pregnant. 6 weeks. My child. I felt the air leave my lungs in a rush. I turned off my phone, walked out onto the balcony overlooking the dark, murmuring ocean, and tried to process the fact that I was going to be a father, and that the woman who was carrying my child was the same person I had just tried to send to prison. Everything had just gotten infinitely more complicated. The waves kept coming, steady, relentless, indifferent to human drama. I sat on the balcony until 3 a.m. watching the ocean and trying to process the fact that I was going to be a father, that Sarah was going to be a mother, that we were going to be connected forever, even if we weren't together, that I had just made everything infinitely more complicated. The waves kept coming, steady, relentless, indifferent to human drama. They had been coming for millions of years, and they would keep coming for millions more. And my problems were just noise against their rhythm. Somehow that helped. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat on the balcony watching the ocean change from black to gray to blue as the sun came up over the Pacific. Sometime around 5 a.m., I ordered room service coffee and tried to brace myself for what was coming. The Department of Labor meeting was at 10 a.m. Pacific time, which meant I needed to catch a 7:30 flight back to Seattle. I would spend less than 24 hours in San Diego in this borrowed piece before I plunged back into the wreckage. I packed my bag, checked out, and drove to the airport in the pre-dawn darkness. The terminal was quiet, just early morning travelers and red-eye survivors shuffling to their gates with dead eyes and carry-on luggage. I felt like I belonged with them. The Walking Dead. People going through the motions. On the flight back, I turned on my phone just long enough to check the news. Shin Logic stock had been delisted. The SEC had opened a formal investigation. The Seattle Times had published a follow-up story with quotes from 3 former employees, including Marcus Williams, describing a pattern of whistleblower retaliation. And Bloomberg had published a think piece titled, "The Hidden Costs of Unicorn Culture: How Chin Logic's Race to Multi-Billion Valuation Led to Regulatory Collapse." It was happening. The story was taking on its own momentum now, beyond my control, beyond Sarah's control. The truth had mass, and mass has gravity, and gravity pulls everything towards it. I landed in Seattle at 9:17 a.m. I took an Uber directly to the Pacific Northwest Regional Office of the Department of Labor, a brutalist concrete building in the International District that looked exactly like what it was, a federal bureaucracy that didn't care about aesthetics. Jennifer Kohler met me in the lobby at 9:55. She was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a handshake that meant business. "Mr. Chun, thank you for coming in." "Thank you for taking this seriously," I said. She led me to a windowless conference room. There were 3 other people there. 2 men in suits who looked like lawyers, and a woman with a laptop who was clearly there to document everything. "These are Deputy Director Matthias and Lead Investigator Rodriguez," Jennifer said. "And this is Ms. Palmer, who will be recording our conversation." I shook hands all around and sat in a chair that was deliberately uncomfortable. Government furniture designed to keep meetings short. "Before we begin," Jennifer said, "I want to clarify a few things. This is a voluntary interview. You are not under oath, but lying to a federal investigator is a crime. You have the right to have an attorney present. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said, "and I don't need an attorney. I'm here to tell you the truth." She nodded and opened a folder that was at least 2 inches thick, my documentation, all printed out. "We have reviewed the materials you sent to the Chin Logic Board," she said. "We have also spoken with several former employees who have corroborated many of your allegations. What we need from you today is context. We need to understand how these practices developed, who knew about them, and whether they were systematic or isolated incidents." "They were systematic," I said, "and everyone in senior leadership knew." Deputy Director Matthias leaned forward. "Everyone. Sarah Chun, CEO, Richard Joy, Board Chairman, Michael Torres, CFO, Lisa Nguyen, General Counsel, David Park, VP of Engineering, and me, Strategic Operations Director." I paused. We all knew. We all participated. Some of us were more enthusiastic about it than others, but we all knew. "Walk us through how it started," Jennifer said. So I did. I told them about the Series B funding round in 2017. The pressure from investors to show growth, to hit metrics. I told them about the first time we misclassified warehouse workers as independent contractors instead of employees, how Sarah had framed it as giving workers flexibility and optimizing our cost structure. I told them how that first compromise made the second one easier, and the third, and the fourth. "It's like a ratchet," I said. "Each decision moves you one click further from center, and there's no mechanism to move back. You tell yourself it's temporary, that you'll fix it once you're profitable, once you've raised the next round. But there's always a reason to wait." "Why didn't you object?" Rodriguez asked. Not accusatory, just curious. I did object. At first. But Sarah is very persuasive. She'd say things like, "Everyone in the industry does this," or, "We're disrupting an outdated regulatory framework." I wanted to believe her, because the alternative was admitting that the company we were building was based on corner-cutting and violations, and I had invested too much, my career, my marriage, my identity, to admit that. Jennifer made a note. "When did you start documenting these practices?" "About 9 months ago, January of this year." I remembered the exact moment. A board meeting where Sarah had dismissed employee safety concerns as operational friction that would be solved at scale. I realized we weren't going to self-correct. I wanted insurance in case I needed it. Insurance against what? Against being made the scapegoat, I said honestly. I knew that if this ever came to light, Sarah would try to blame operations. She would say she gave high-level directives and trusted me to implement them legally. I needed proof that she had known exactly what we were doing and had explicitly approved it. And she didn't know every detail. Sarah Chun is brilliant, and she's meticulous. She didn't delegate compliance decisions. She made them herself with full knowledge of the risks. Matthias pulled a specific document. This is an email from CEO Chun to you dated March 15, 2024. Can you explain what it refers to? I looked at the email. It was the one I had flagged. Derek, the environmental compliance costs for the Portland facility are unacceptable. Find a way to reduce them by at least 40%. I don't care how. Just make it work. That was about wastewater discharge permits, I said. The Portland facility was exceeding allowable pollutant levels. The compliance solution would have cost about $800,000 in new filtration systems. Sarah wanted me to find a cheaper option. What did you do? I found a consultant who specialized in creative compliance solutions. He essentially taught us how to misreport the wastewater discharge levels in a way that was difficult to audit. We'd run clean water through the meters during scheduled inspections and discharge the actual wastewater at night when monitoring was less rigorous. The room was very quiet. You are describing deliberate fraud, Matthias said. Yes, I nodded. I am. And you participated in this fraud. Yes. I found a consultant. I approved the payments. I implemented the system. I met his eyes. That's why I'm here. I'm not claiming to be innocent. I'm claiming to be done. Jennifer looked at me for a long moment. Mr. Chun, I want to be clear about something. The testimony you are providing us today could be used in criminal proceedings against Shin Logic, against Sarah Chun, and potentially against you. You could be prosecuted for your role in these violations. Do you understand? I understand, I said again. But 20 people lost their jobs for trying to stop this, for doing the right thing. I kept my job by doing the wrong thing. I need to make that right, even if it costs me. She nodded slowly. Tell us about the whistleblower retaliation. So I did. I told them about Marcus Williams and the others. About how anyone who raised concerns was systematically marginalized and then fired for performance issues that were trumped up after the fact. I told them about the clear, deliberate pattern of silencing dissent through intimidation and termination. Did you participate in those firings? Rodriguez asked. I was in the meetings where they were discussed. I didn't vote against them, which makes me complicit. We went through the documentation page by page. At some point, someone brought in sandwiches. I didn't eat mine, just drank water and kept talking. At 3:47 p.m., Jennifer finally closed her folder. Mr. Chun, I think we have what we need for now. We will likely have follow-up questions. You should know that we will be interviewing other Shin Logic employees, including current senior management, including Sarah, Mrs. Chun. Yes, I nodded. She's going to deny everything. She's going to say I'm fabricating evidence because I'm angry about the end of our marriage. She's already started that narrative with the company. We are aware of that possibility, Matthias said. But you have provided us with documentary evidence that is not dependent on your credibility. Emails, financial records, meeting minutes. These things speak for themselves. There's something else you should know, I said. Sarah told me last night that she's pregnant. 6 weeks, which makes it my child. Jennifer's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Calculation. That does not change our investigation, she said carefully. But thank you for disclosing it. I stood up. My legs were stiff from sitting for 6 hours straight. What happens now? Now we expand our investigation. We will audit Shin Logic's facilities. We will coordinate with the SEC on the accounting matters. And we will refer several matters to the U.S. Attorney's Office for potential criminal prosecution. How long does that take? Months, she said. Maybe longer. These things move slowly. But Mr. Chun, I want you to know that what you did today took courage. Not many people are willing to implicate themselves to expose wrongdoing. I didn't have much choice, I said. Once I sent that first email, this was inevitable. You had a choice, she corrected. You could have destroyed your documentation and claimed it was all a misunderstanding. You could have accepted a settlement from Shin Logic and signed an NDA. You could have protected yourself. Instead, you chose this. I walked out of the Department of Labor building into the gray Seattle late afternoon. The rain had started again, soft and persistent. My phone had 43 new messages. I ignored them all and called an Uber. But instead of going to a hotel, I gave the driver the address in Queen and my house, the one Sarah and I had bought together. I needed to see it one more time. The Uber dropped me off at 4:35 p.m. Sarah's car wasn't in the driveway. She was probably still at the office, in crisis meetings, trying to save her company from the bomb I detonated. I used my key to let myself in. The house was exactly as I had left it 4 days ago. My coffee cup still in the sink, the book I was reading still on the end table, the wedding photo still on the mantelpiece. We looked so young in that photo, so certain. I walked through the room slowly, cataloging memories. I sat at my home desk and opened my laptop. There was one more thing I needed to do. I opened my personal email and composed a message to Richard Joy. Richard, I met with the Department of Labor today and provided 6 hours of testimony. I have told them everything I know about Shin Logic's violations. I have implicated myself, Sarah, and the senior leadership team. I am telling you this as a courtesy. The federal investigation will be thorough. The SEC will be involved, possibly the U.S. Attorney's Office. The company as it currently exists cannot survive this. My advice, cooperate fully. Bring in outside compliance experts. And for the love of God, don't let Sarah try to fight this. The evidence is overwhelming. I am sorry it has come to this, but it was always going to come to this eventually. Derek. I hit send. Then I packed a bag with more clothes, a few books, and a few personal items. I took the wedding photo from the mantle, laid it face down on the coffee table, and wrote one more note for Sarah. I was at the house. I took a few things. The rest is yours. I met with the DOL today, told them everything. I implicated myself along with everyone else. This isn't revenge. It's accountability. If you are really pregnant, we will have to work out custody arrangements through lawyers. But I can't be your husband anymore. I hope you fix the company. I hope you learn from this. I hope our child grows up knowing that truth matters more than winning. I left the note on the kitchen counter next to the ring I had left days before. Then I walked out and closed the door behind me. The rain was falling harder now. I stood in the driveway and let it soak me, let it wash away the last residue of the life I had been living. I checked into a different hotel, a mid-range place near the university district, the kind of place where no one cared who you were or what you had done. The room was functional. It was perfect, anonymous, a place to exist without being perceived. I ordered Thai food and sat on the bed, eating pad Thai straight from the container, watching the local news on mute. They were still leading with the Shin logic story. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow they would have the DOL investigation to report. They would have federal involvement. My phone rang at 8:37 p.m. David Park. You really did it, he said. You sat down with the feds and burned the whole thing down. How do you know? Because Richard Joy called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Because our general counsel just hired outside criminal defense lawyers. Because Sarah locked herself in her office at 4 p.m. and hasn't come out. She found my note. I said. What note? I went to the house. I left her a note saying I testified, that I told them everything. David was quiet for a moment. Jesus, Derek, you could have just sent a text. No, I said. I couldn't. This had to be on paper. It had to be real. Well, it's real now. The entire executive team is in panic mode. And Sarah? Sarah isn't talking to anyone. But Derek, there's something you need to know. She sent a company-wide email at 6 p.m. You want to hear what it said? I heard a rustle of paper. Then David reading. Team, I want to directly address the rumors and media speculation. My husband, Derek Shin, is going through a severe personal crisis. He has made allegations about company practices that are not supported by fact. We believe his judgment has been compromised by mental health challenges and the breakdown of our marriage. We are cooperating fully with all regulatory inquiries and are confident that these baseless allegations will be proven false. In the meantime, I ask for your patience and your trust. We have built something extraordinary together, and I will not allow one person's personal vendetta to destroy it. Onward, Sarah. I closed my eyes. There it was. The narrative she had promised. Derek Chun, the unreliable narrator, the vengeful husband, the man having a breakdown. How did people respond? I asked. Mixed. Some people believe her. Some people are updating their LinkedIn profiles. A lot of people are just confused. Derek, she's calling you mentally ill. She's putting it in writing to 300 employees. That's defamation. Yeah, I finished. My lawyer is going to love that. We talked for a few more minutes. After I hung up, I opened Sarah's email on my laptop. It was still in my inbox. I read it 3 times. She was good. She had positioned herself as the victim, the CEO whose mentally unstable husband was trying to destroy her life's work. She had made it personal instead of procedural. But the Department of Labor didn't care about narratives. They cared about evidence. And I had given them 67 pages of it. At 11:47 p.m., my phone vibrated with a text message. Mr. Chun, this is Marcus Williams. I also testified before the DOL today. So did 6 other former employees. Thank you for making it possible for us to tell our stories. We stand with you. I stared at that message for a long time. 7 people. 7 people who had lost their jobs for doing the right thing, who had been living with the knowledge that they had been punished for having integrity. And I had been the one who still had a salary, still had a title, still had access to the systems. I had been the one who could have stopped it years ago and hadn't. Thank you for your courage, I texted back. I should have done this sooner. You did it when you could, he replied. That's what matters. But it didn't feel like what mattered. At 1:23 a.m., another text message. This one from Sarah. I know you were at the house. I found your note. You told me yesterday this wasn't about revenge, but you are destroying me, Derek. You are destroying everything I am. I am pregnant with your child, and you are trying to send me to prison. What kind of person does that? I typed. The kind of person who spent 6 hours testifying about crimes I helped commit. I implicated myself, too. Sarah, this isn't about destroying you. It's about telling the truth. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. She was typing, deleting, typing. The truth is you're bitter about the affair, and you're using the company to hurt me. The truth is, we broke federal law repeatedly and deliberately. The affair just made me stop pretending we hadn't. I can't go to prison. I'm having a baby. Then you should have thought about that before you build a company on violations. You helped build it. I know. That's why I'm cooperating with the investigation. I'm not claiming to be innocent. I'm claiming to be done. Long pause. Then what do you want? Just tell me what you want and I'll give it to you. Money. The house. Your name cleared publicly. Just tell me what it takes to make you stop. She still thought this was a negotiation. I typed, I want you to fix the company. Come into full compliance, reclassify the workers, install proper environmental controls, restate the financials, make it right, even if it costs you your valuation. That's impossible. The board will never approve it. The investors will sue. Then I guess you'll have to choose between your company and your freedom. That's not fair. Neither was asking me to approve an open marriage while you were pregnant with my child. Life isn't fair, Sarah. Consequences are just real. I turned my phone off. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the ultrasound picture. That tiny flickering heartbeat. That little life that would arrive in 7 months. I had to be better than I had been. I had to be more than just the guy who documented violations and testified against his wife. I had to be a father, and I had no idea how to do that. But I would figure it out. At 5:30 a.m., my phone started buzzing even though it was off. I turned it on to find 17 new messages. The Seattle Times had published a breaking news story. Federal investigators expand Shin logic probe. Multiple whistleblowers detail systematic violations. The article quoted sources familiar with the investigation and detailed the testimony of multiple former employees. It mentioned me by name as a senior executive who came forward voluntarily with documentation. It also included Sarah's email about my mental health crisis, followed by a statement from the DOL spokesperson. We evaluate evidence, not narratives. Our investigation is based on documentary proof and corroborated testimony from multiple sources. That was the headline that would kill Sarah's strategy. The feds had essentially called her a liar on the record. By 7 a.m., it was the lead story on every local news site. By 8 a.m., it had hit the national business news. The SEC formally announced its investigation at 9:15 a.m. The EPA issued a statement at 9:47. By 10 a.m., Shin Logic's valuation had unofficially dropped by 60%. At 11:23 a.m., David called. You need to see this, he said. Turn on King County News. Sarah is holding a press conference. I found the channel. There she was, standing in front of the Shin Logic building. She looked terrible, exhausted, but she was immaculately dressed. I want to directly address the allegations that have been made about Shin Logic, she began, her voice steady. My husband, Derek Shin, is a man I love, a man I have built a life and a company with. He is also a man who is struggling with serious mental health issues related to our separation. A reporter shouted a question. Ms. Chun, the Department of Labor says they have documentary evidence from multiple sources. Are they all misunderstanding? I believe they have taken ordinary business communications out of context, Sarah said smoothly. Another reporter. Your husband alleges that you retaliated against employees who raised compliance concerns. How do you respond? That is absolutely false. We have always encouraged employees to raise concerns through the proper channels. For just a second, Sarah's composure cracked. Ms. Chun, another reporter called out. Sources say you sent a company-wide email calling your husband mentally unstable. Isn't that defamatory? I sent an email expressing concern for my husband's well-being, she said carefully. That is not defamation. It is honesty about a difficult personal situation. I turned off the TV. She's going down fighting, David said on the phone. Yes, I agreed. She will. Will it work? No, I said, because I have the emails. I have the meeting minutes. I have 7 other witnesses. She can spin whatever narrative she wants. But the evidence doesn't care about her story. The board meeting happened on Friday morning. David sent me updates every 20 minutes like he was live tweeting a corporate execution. 9:03 a.m. They're all here. Sarah, Richard, the Goldman rep, outside legal counsel. They all look like they're at a funeral. 9:47 a.m. Goldman has just formally withdrawn their support. They've recommended the CEO's immediate suspension pending the investigation. 10:15 a.m. Sarah is fighting back. Says she won't step down. Says the company will collapse without her. 10:38 a.m. Richard, just read your email to the entire board. The one about cooperating with the DOL. Sarah's face went white. 11:02 a.m. They're taking a vote. Sarah's not in the room. 11:19 a.m. 6-1 vote to suspend Sarah as CEO, effective immediately. 11:23 a.m. Sarah just walked out. Didn't say a word. Just walked out. I read that last message 3 times. Sarah had built Shin Logic from nothing, and the board had taken it away from her in 11 minutes. I felt empty. Richard Joy called me at 11:47. Derek, I wanted you to hear this directly from me. The board has voted to suspend Sarah. We're bringing in an interim CEO. We are also accepting your documentation as accurate and beginning a full internal audit. We will reclassify workers, install proper environmental controls, and restate financials. That's going to tank your valuation. I know. We're projecting a 70% reduction, maybe more, he sighed. But it's better than criminal prosecution for the entire board. You're doing the right thing. I'm doing the necessary thing. There's a difference. Derek, Sarah's lawyers are pushing the mental health narrative hard. They're going to go after your motive, too. Say this was about revenge for the affair. The DOL has the testimony of 7 other former employees. Are they all having affairs with Sarah, too? He laughed a short, bitter laugh. No, I guess not. For the record, I believe you. What happens to Sarah now? I asked. Legally, she's facing potential criminal charges. The U.S. Attorney's Office is reviewing the case. Personally, I don't know. She's not returning calls. Her lawyer says she's taking some time to focus on her health. Her health. The baby. She told me she's pregnant. I know. She told the board. Used it as an argument for why she shouldn't be suspended. His voice grew cautious. Is it yours? She says 6 weeks, which would make it mine. Before Singapore, before Marcus. Are you going to contest paternity? No, I said. If she's really pregnant, and if it's mine, then I'm going to be a father. I'm not going to punish a child for its mother's choices. That's very decent of you. Decency has nothing to do with it. It's just reality. At 4:15 p.m., I got a call from Assistant U.S. Attorney James Morrison. Mr. Chun, I'm in the criminal division. Do you have a few minutes? My stomach sank. You are currently a cooperating witness, but you are also a potential defendant. If you are willing to testify in any criminal proceedings, if you are willing to provide additional documentation, then we would be willing to recommend immunity or significantly reduce charges. And if I'm not willing? Then you will be prosecuted along with everyone else. What do you need from me? Full cooperation and complete honesty. And testimony if it goes to trial, against Sarah, against anyone involved in criminal conduct, including yourself, if that's what the truth requires. I'll cooperate. At 6:42 p.m., my phone rang. Sarah. I stared at it for 3 rings. Then I answered. Derek. Her voice was barely a whisper. Broken. Can we talk, please? I mean, in person, face to face. No lawyers, no recordings, just us. Where? I asked. There's a coffee shop on Capitol Hill. Analog Coffee. Do you remember? Our first date, 14 years ago. Okay, I said. Give me 30 minutes. I sat down across from her. Thank you for coming, she said. Your lawyer emailed me about custody arrangements. I know. That's not why I asked you to come. I want to apologize. Really apologize. Not the lawyer version. I want to say I'm sorry for what I did to you, what we did to us. I was so focused on proving I was special, on building something that mattered, that I forgot that the person who was building it with me actually mattered, too. You weren't infrastructure, Derek. You were my partner, and I treated you like you were disposable. Yes, I said quietly. You did. The affair stopped. It started again. Marcus was a symptom, not the cause. I was running from the fact that I had become someone who cared more about valuation than values. Why are you telling me this now? Because today I lost everything. The company, the board's trust, probably my freedom. And the only thing I care about is that I lost you. She reached a hand across the table, as if to take mine. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to come back. I just needed you to know that you were right about everything. I'm going to testify against you, I said. The U.S. attorney called me today. They're offering me immunity if I cooperate fully. She nodded slowly. I know, and you still wanted to see me. I wanted to see you because you're the mother of my child, and because I needed you to hear me say I'm sorry before everything gets even worse. Are you really pregnant? I asked. Or was that manipulation too? She slid her phone across the table. An ultrasound image. 6 weeks and 2 days. Due at the end of June. I have an OB appointment next week if you want to come. I stared at the picture. Our child. I'll go, I said. Thank you. I hope you get help, I said finally. Therapy. Maybe someone to talk to about why you needed to be exceptional so badly that you were willing to break laws and hurt people. I already started, she said. Court-ordered technically, but I'm actually going. Good, Derek. After all this is over, after the trials, after the legal stuff, do you think we could try to be friends for the baby's sake? Maybe, I said. But first, you need to fix what you broke. Cooperate with the investigations. Take responsibility, stop fighting, and start accepting the consequences. My lawyer says that's suicide. Your lawyer is trying to keep you out of prison. I'm trying to help you keep your soul. I left her there in the coffee shop, sitting at our table. The OB appointment was on a Tuesday at 3 p.m. I got there 15 minutes early. Sarah looked better, more composed. We sat at opposite ends of a couch in the waiting room. I stood in the hallway while she changed into the gown. She wheeled over the ultrasound machine, and I stood there, taking her hand. Dr. Morrison applied gel to Sarah's abdomen and moved the transducer. And suddenly, there it was on the screen, a tiny blob with a flickering heartbeat. There's your baby, Dr. Morrison said. The heartbeat looks good, strong, and steady at 142 beats per minute. The due date looks like June 28th. Is it safe for me to fly? Sarah asked. I might need to travel for legal proceedings. Morrison looked between us. Given your stress levels, I would recommend staying on the ground if possible. Stress is not good for the pregnancy. We walked out of the office with a printout of the ultrasound and stood in the parking lot. That was surreal, Sarah said finally. Yes. Derek, can we try to keep the baby stuff separate from the legal stuff? Can we try to be actual co-parents? I'll try, I said. But Sarah, you need to understand something. I am going to testify truthfully about what we did at Shin Logic. That is non-negotiable. I know, but the baby, that's separate. We'll figure out custody, co-parenting, all of it. I will not use the legal stuff to hurt our child. She nodded, and for a moment, I saw relief cross her face. I drove back to my apartment. I was going to be a father. Rachel Kim called. I need you to stop doing interviews. Stop making statements. Everything you say can and will be used in the custody proceedings. Sarah's team sent over their initial framework, and it's aggressive. Primary physical custody for Sarah. You get supervised visits initially. I felt anger rise in my chest. I don't have a permanent address because I left the house we shared because she was planning to sleep with other people while married to me. I know, and we will argue that. But Derek, we need to show the court that you are prepared for this. Sign the apartment lease. Set up a nursery. Take parenting classes. Show them you are serious about being a father. Not just serious about winning against Sarah. I am serious. Then prove it. Document everything. Be the model co-parent. Even when Sarah isn't. Always take the high road. At 8:23 p.m., I got an email from Assistant U.S. Attorney James Morrison. Mr. Chun, we are scheduling your formal proffer session for next Thursday at 10 a.m. I should inform you that we are also in discussions with Sarah Chun's legal team about a possible plea agreement. This does not change your obligation to testify truthfully, but I wanted you to be aware that the case may not go to trial. Sarah might take a deal. I opened my laptop and started looking at my finances. The joint accounts would need to be separated. The house would need to be sold. We had built a life together, and now we were dismantling it line by line on a spreadsheet. At 11:47 p.m., Sarah texted, I saw the news segment. Thank you for not doing interviews, for not making this a circus. You're welcome. I'm scared, Derek. About the legal stuff, about the baby, about everything, and I don't know how to do this. No one knows how to do this, I typed back. We just figure it out as we go. The furnished apartment was in Fremont, overlooking the canal. I signed the lease and spent Thursday moving in the few possessions I had. I stood in the empty living room and realized I was going to need to build a nursery. I took out my phone and started searching for cribs. The proffer session was scheduled for 10 a.m. the next morning. My lawyer, Thomas Brennan, had spent 3 hours prepping me. Tell the truth, he had said. That's the only rule. Don't downplay. Don't exaggerate. Don't try to protect anyone, including yourself. At 9:47 a.m. on Friday, I sat in a conference room at the U.S. Attorney's office with Thomas by my side. Morrison was there. In exchange for your full and truthful cooperation, Morrison said, we are prepared to recommend immunity from prosecution for all violations you participated in prior to November 15, 2024. Mrs. Chun's attorneys are currently negotiating a plea agreement. She would plead guilty to specific charges in exchange for reduced sentencing recommendations. What kind of sentence? I asked. Likely 2 to 3 years. She would likely report to prison in April or May, before the baby's due date. I tried to imagine Sarah giving birth in prison. Let's begin, Thomas said quietly. We went through everything. The Portland facility wastewater situation. The worker misclassification. The whistleblower retaliation. Each time Morrison asked the same questions. What happened? Who decided? Who knew? Did anyone object? And each time I told them the truth. At 1:15 p.m., Morrison called for a lunch break. You're doing well, Thomas said. Consistent, clear, not trying to downplay or exaggerate. You are taking responsibility. That matters. We went back at 2 p.m. and continued for another 4 hours. By the time Morrison finally closed his folders at 6:08 p.m., I felt exhausted. We will prepare the formal immunity agreement for your signature. We are also in discussions with Sarah Chun's legal team about a possible plea agreement. She would plead guilty to specific charges in exchange for reduced sentencing recommendations. What about Sarah? I asked. Am I allowed to talk to her about non-legal things? The baby, custody arrangements. You can talk about those things, but do not discuss the case. They proposed a global settlement meeting with both of our legal teams to resolve everything at once. I'll do the meeting. I drove to my new apartment and sat in the empty living room with the lights off. My phone vibrated. Sarah, how did it go? Long day. I'm tired. Morrison's office called mine. They said you were very thorough. I told the truth. That's all. They proposed a global settlement meeting with both of our legal teams to resolve everything at once. I know. I agreed to the meeting. I wish we were figuring it out together as partners, not adversaries. Me too. But we can't go back. We can only go forward. I opened my laptop and started looking at cribs again. I added one to my cart, then a changing table, then a rocking chair. Building a nursery in an empty apartment for a child who didn't exist yet, who would be born into the wreckage of everything his parents had destroyed. At 11:47 p.m., I placed the order. The global settlement meeting was held in a neutral conference room on a Wednesday morning in early December. The first snow of the season was falling. There were 8 of us around a polished table. Sarah looked smaller, the pregnancy now a slight curve under her sweater. The U.S. Attorney's Office is prepared to offer the following. Mrs. Chun pleads guilty to 2 counts of environmental regulation violations and 1 count of securities fraud. We recommend 28 months incarceration, followed by 2 years of supervised release and $500,000 in fines. 28 months. 2 years and 4 months. Our child would be 2 when Sarah got out. Sarah's face was pale. Walls, her attorney, leaned over. My client accepts those terms, Walls said. Just like that. Sarah Chun agreed to go to prison and to never run another public company again. Which brings us to the custody agreement, Patricia said. We proposed the following: joint legal custody with Derek having primary physical custody for the first 28 months, while Sarah serves her sentence. Sarah would have visitation rights in accordance with Bureau of Prisons regulations. Following her release, we transitioned to a shared custody arrangement. Week on, week off. We went through the details for another hour. At 12:47 p.m., Patricia slid a document across the table. If both parties agree to these terms, we can have the paperwork finalized by the end of the week. Sarah looked at me. Do you agree? I agree, I said. We signed papers. A lot of papers. Sarah's hand was shaking as she signed her plea agreement. Thank you, Sarah said quietly, for agreeing to primary custody, for not fighting me on visitation rights. I'm not doing it for you, I said. I'm doing it because our child deserves better than parents who destroy each other. She nodded. I'm starting real therapy tomorrow, and I'm going to write our child a letter explaining everything, why I made the choices I did, what happened, why I'm in prison, so that when they're old enough to ask, they'll have it. I think that's the right thing to do. I'm sorry, she said finally, for everything. I know, I said. I'm sorry, too, for not stopping it sooner, for being complicit for so long. You did the right thing. So did you today? Taking the deal, taking responsibility. It won't undo what happened, but it's a start. The nursery furniture had arrived the week before. I had spent a whole Saturday putting it together. The crib with its clean white lines, the changing table, the rocking chair. The room was ready. 3 months later, Sarah pleaded guilty in federal court on a gray March morning. I wasn't there, but I watched the news coverage from my apartment. She stood before the judge in a simple blue dress, her pregnancy visible now at 5 months, and she said, "Guilty, Your Honor," 3 times, once for each count. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for mid-April. We had seen each other twice since the settlement meeting. Once for another OB appointment where we found out we were having a girl. Once for a birthing class that Sarah's therapist had suggested we take together, where we practiced breathing techniques and tried to pretend we were a normal couple preparing for a baby. We weren't normal. We would never be normal, but we were trying. The crib in my apartment had a mobile now. Little stars and moons that spun slowly, playing a soft lullaby. I had painted one wall a pale yellow, bought tiny clothes. I had read 3 parenting books, watched countless YouTube videos, joined a support group for single fathers, trying to prepare for something you can never really prepare for. David came over one Saturday and helped me install a car seat. "You're really going to do this," he said. "I'm really going to do this." How do you feel? Terrified, excited, like I'm about to jump off a cliff without a parachute. But also, I looked at the car seat, like it's the most important thing I'll ever do. "You're going to be a good dad," David said, "because you care about getting it right. That's half the battle." Sarah's sentencing hearing was on April 18th. I went this time, sitting in the back of the courtroom. Sarah stood when asked to address the court. She looked fragile, her belly round with our daughter, her voice steady. "Your Honor, I built a company I'm proud of, but I built it the wrong way. I cut corners. I violated regulations. I prioritized growth over compliance and success over integrity. I hurt people. I am not asking for leniency because I am pregnant. I am asking for the chance to serve my sentence, to accept the consequences of my choices, and to eventually be the kind of mother my daughter deserves, the kind who values truth over winning." The judge sentenced her to 28 months, as recommended. She would report to FCI Dublin in California on May 15th, 3 weeks away, 5 weeks before our daughter's due date. The labor started at 3:47 a.m. My phone rang and I knew before I answered what it was. Sarah's mother sounded panicked. "Sarah's in labor. She's asking for you." "I'm on my way." I drove to Swedish hospital. Sarah was in a delivery room. She looked up when I came in and her face crumpled with relief. "You came?" "Of course I came." I took her hand. "How far apart are the contractions?" 5 minutes. They say it could be a while yet." I stayed through the contractions and the breathing and the long hours of waiting. At 6:23 p.m., after 14 hours of labor, I watched my daughter take her first breath. She was perfect. The nurse laid her on Sarah's chest, and Sarah started to cry, and I stood there with my hand on her shoulder. "Hello, little one," Sarah whispered. "I'm your mommy, and this is your daddy, and we love you so much." Emma Rose Chun, 7 pounds and 4 ounces. Perfect APGAR scores. A full head of dark hair, and her mother's nose. We were allowed to have an hour together, the 3 of us, before reality intruded. Sarah would have 2 weeks at home before she had to report to prison. "She has your eyes," Sarah said, looking at Emma. "She has your determination," I replied. "Look how strong she's holding my finger." Sarah looked at me. "Thank you for being here, for doing this with me, for being the kind of person who shows up even when it's hard." "Always," I said. "For her, always." 2 weeks later, I stood in my apartment holding Emma, watching from the window as Sarah's car pulled away. Her mother was driving her to the airport, to California, to FCI Dublin, where she would spend the next 2 years. We had said our goodbyes an hour ago. Sarah had held Emma for a long time, crying quietly, memorizing her face. Then she had handed her to me and walked out before she broke down completely. Emma slept in my arms, warm and perfect, not knowing her mother was just gone. "It's just you and me for a while, little one," I whispered, "but we're going to be okay." My phone vibrated. A text message from Sarah. "Kiss her for me. Tell her every day I love her. I'll call when I can. I will be safe." I looked at Emma, her tiny sleeping face, and thought about everything that had led to this. The violations, the betrayals, the moment I clicked send on that email. It had all been necessary, because sometimes the truth burns everything down. Sometimes accountability costs more than you think you can pay. But sometimes in the ashes something new grows, something real, something worth protecting. I carried Emma to the nursery, to the crib I had assembled on the yellow walls I had painted. I laid her down gently, and I made a promise to her, to myself, to the version of Sarah who would get out of prison in 2 years. I promised to tell the truth always, even when it's hard. I promised to value integrity over success, people over profit. I promised to be here every day, every feeding and diaper change and sleepless night, to be the father she deserved. The snow had started falling again outside, soft and quiet, blanketing everything in white, fresh and clean and new, like starting over, like second chances, like the truth finally setting you free. Emma stirred in her crib, and I reached down to touch her hand. "Welcome to the world, sweetheart," I whispered. "It's complicated and messy, and sometimes it breaks your heart, but it's also beautiful, and we're going to figure it out together." Her fingers wrapped around mine, and for the first time in months, I felt hope. The truth served as justice. Sarah served 23 months with good behavior, getting out in early 2027 to begin the long work of rebuilding her relationship with Emma. Derek raised Emma as a single father, documenting every milestone in letters he would give to Sarah when she was released. Shin logic was restructured, brought into full compliance, and survived. Smaller, humbler, but finally operating with integrity. Was Derek's decision to expose the corporate crimes, knowing it would send the mother of his unborn child to prison, a final act of bitter revenge masked as integrity, or the only truly loving act he could perform for his daughter's future? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share your thoughts about this story in the comments.